The Blackhawks look to go and snatch the crown off the Kings and pick up their first win of the road trip.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another game day preview edition of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now your number one sports podcasting network, where we bring you your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. On today's episode, I'll preview tonight's late night matchup in Los Angeles between the Blackhawks and Kings. Then I'll discuss Spencer Knight's chances of heading to Italy as part of Team USA. And then in segment 3, I'll dive into another Blackhawks prospect being named to a World Junior Championship preliminary roster. But first, just a quick reminder to please go and show some support to Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram. I've been pumping out a lot of content over there over the last couple of months, so please make sure to go and show some support if you haven't done so already. But happy game day, Blackhawks fans. The 4-game West Coast road trip continues here tonight in Los Angeles with the second meeting of the season between the Blackhawks and Kings. And it's also the first of 2 matchups here over the next 3 days, both at Crypto.com Arena, which I'm not sure if I've ever seen that before, aside from, the COVID-shortened 2020 season. There are usually home and home series, a couple of them sprinkled throughout the year, but normally those are like 2 games in 2 days or 2 games in 3 days where the 2 clubs split the home matchups. Don't really see 2 teams meeting up in the same building in just a couple of days' time. But that's the case here for the Blackhawks for the second and third games of their road trip, which will end on Sunday night in Anaheim. Going back to the first meeting, though, of the season, back on October 26th at the United Center, was a Sunday game for the Hawks. I remember Tyler Bertuzzi didn't play due to an injury. Hawks raced out to a 1-0 advantage as they had the Kings on the back end of a back-to-back where they had to travel to 2 different cities in as many days. Connor Bedard put Chicago ahead 1-0 after the first period, only for Los Angeles to go in, cripple all of that momentum that the Blackhawks established early. Kevin Fiala and Alex Laferriere with goals in the middle frame to put the Kings ahead for good, and then they went and played shutdown hockey in that final frame where they did a really sound job of limiting the amount of chances and puck possession that the Blackhawks had in their own end. Joel Armia added the empty netter for good measure to make it a 3-1 final. But coming into this matchup, getting into a little bit of a breakdown on what the Kings have been up to. They currently sit in 3rd place in the NHL's Pacific Division, 1 point back of the Vegas Golden Knights, and just 2 points back of the first place Anaheim Ducks, with a 12-7-7 record through 26 contests, and they're 2-2-3 over their last 7 coming into this one, but are coming off of a 3-1 loss in their last time out on Tuesday to the Washington Capitals. And get this, Blackhawks fans, that was the first time for the Kings since November 11th that a game wasn't decided by 1 goal. They had 8 games in a row that were determined, that had a 1-goal final outcome. So this Kings team frequently plays a lot of close contested matchups, and when they do get the lead late, as we learned from that first meeting in October, they sure know how to hang on to it. However, it has been a challenge for Los Angeles, unsurprisingly, offensively, once again here this season, as they come into this game 28th in the NHL in goals per game at just 2.62. They're also 30th out of 32 teams on the power play. Diving into some individual statistics, Kevin Fiala is their leading goal scorer with 10 goals. He's the only one in double digits, while Adrian Kempe, and Corey Perry are the only 3 players on the roster with more than 6 goals. So definitely a team that leans heavily on their defense and goaltending, as they're 6th in the NHL in goals allowed per game, also 6th in shots on goal allowed per game, and 10th in total team save percentage. So the Blackhawks going to have their hands full with a strong defensive group in Los Angeles at Crypto.com Arena here this evening. As far as the Blackhawks projected lineup goes, once again, just like I did on Tuesday, because this is a 9 p.m. Central Time puck drop. And by the way, second consecutive game on ESPN Plus here for the Blackhawks. I don't know whose Cheerios we peed in to have that happen, but Yeah, unfortunately, 2 games in a row for the Hawks on ESPN Plus, and I don't think it's going to be as good of a broadcast team as it was on Tuesday, even though John Tortorella kind of ruined that with a real lackluster performance during those intermissions. Regardless, the Blackhawks lineup for tonight at the time of this recording obviously is still unconfirmed. They're not going to be hitting the ice for the morning skate until like 3 hours from now at the time of this recording. So taking a little bit of a stab at it here once again. I wasn't 100% right on the forward lines when I did this on Tuesday, as Jeff Blashill change things up a little bit, but I do feel pretty confident that this is what he's going to be going with tonight in Los Angeles. Ryan Green, Connor Bedard, Andre Burakovsky as the top line. Green, I thought, made a couple of real savvy defensive plays, particularly on the sequence that led to Connor Bedard's jaw-dropping goal, which put the Blackhawks ahead 3-2 in the third period. Unfortunate that they weren't able to hang on to that lead, but don't see any changes coming to this top line. I think Green once again deserves to remain there. He now has points in 6 of his last 9 games, and altogether just continues to show he has more offense in his arsenal as a rookie than I think anyone anticipated. So I think it's going to be Bedard, Burakovsky, and Ryan Green as the top line. The second line is where we saw one of the changes made by Blashill on Tuesday, as he bumped Teuvo Teravainen down and put Oliver Moore back up on the wing along with Tyler Bertuzzi, Frankie Nazar in the middle. And I thought that trio had a really nice showing in Las Vegas. Oliver Moore, one of his best, if not the best game of his NHL career thus far, tied the game up early in the first period with his 3rd goal of the season. Tyler Bertuzzi added another 2 points. That now gives him 5 consecutive multi-point road games, which has only been done by Dennis Savard and Bobby Hull in Blackhawks history. So Tyler Bertuzzi putting himself in some elite conversations because of how impactful he's been for this team on a consistent basis. And I did think Frankie Nazar showed off his wheels better than he has in a month. I love the speed that Frank played with. Hopefully he can do that once again here this evening. And maybe, as I talked about just a couple of days ago, he's finally starting to shed that nagging injury that might have plagued him for a while there in November. Teuvo Teravainen was then moved on down to the third line with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev. Found this to be a little bit interesting just because, as I've been outspoken about on the show, I do feel like ideally Ryan Donato, Jason Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev just make a terrific checking line that Jeff Blashill, I think, would feel real comfortable throwing out there in most of the team's defensive situations. Teuvo Teravainen, is a sturdy defensive player as well. I do kind of like Donato better as a fit there, but I understand that Teuvo makes sense joining a line along with those two. I just think Donato is a little bit of a feistier player compared to Teuvo, and that's kind of always been my issue with Teravainen, is he's not very aggressive. He's, not super engaged in terms of his physicality, right? He's just doesn't play with a huge chip on his shoulder. And I think for the Blackhawks third line, personally, Ryan Donato can play with a little more grit than Teuvo Teravainen provides. So that's why I'd prefer Ryan Donato there, but I do understand, he can play center better than Teuvo Teravainen can, so maybe that weighs into the decision a little bit, putting Dickinson down on the fourth line along with Colton Dach, even though with 11 forwards in the lineup, Jeff Blashill frequently kind of moves some pieces around if he feels like it's necessary in terms of switching up line combinations. But I'm expecting Landon Slaggert and Sam Lafferty to be the healthy scratches once again here tonight, Blackhawks fans. One thing I will say, though, is Sam Rinzel, I believe, only took 1 shift in the third period on Tuesday in Las Vegas. I do, in general, feel like he's been better since that healthy scratching a couple of weekends ago against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I feel like he's been using his wheels to his advantage a lot better. I'm still guessing Rinzel is going to be in the lineup tonight. However, with Landon Slaggert as an extra, being still relatively young in his career, I've mentioned, I think the Blackhawks are going to have to potentially send him back down to Rockford here soon just because of how consistently he's finding himself outside of the lineup. Well, I do wonder if tonight could be an opportunity for Slaggert to draw back in on the fourth line and potentially the Blackhawks go with 12 forwards and only 6 defensemen for one of the few times this year. I'm expecting, though, Rinzel still to play, but I'm pointing out that it is a possibility that Blashill changes up things and goes with 12 forwards and 6 defensemen in the lineup this evening. One thing to keep an eye on for sure when the Blackhawks hit the ice for their morning skate at 1 p.m. Central Time. In goal for the Hawks, I'm expecting it to be Spencer Knight once again. As I broke down on yesterday's episode, kind of imagining how Blashill and the coaching staff want to utilize their goaltenders during this current road trip, I would think Spencer Knight obviously started on Tuesday in Vegas. I would think with a back-to-back coming up this weekend, Saturday, once again in Los Angeles, second meeting in 3 days between these teams. And then the road trip ends on Sunday against the Anaheim Ducks, who Spencer Knight has played against both times so far this year. He's also 5-0 in 5 career games against the Ducks and has some really stout numbers against them. So I'm thinking the Blackhawks would like to roll Knight back out against them on Sunday. That means Soderblom starting the front end of the back-to-back on Saturday, which means Spencer Knight is going once again here this evening. And, he was excellent again. I talked more so about Carter Hart on yesterday's recap episode, but Spencer Knight did his thing as he's done all year long and made a couple of real dandy saves late in overtime to help get that game to a shootout as well. Unfortunate that the Blackhawks weren't able to get the finished product in that dominant OT, and outside of Connor Bedard, couldn't score another goal in the shootout. But Spencer, as he's done so consistently this year, continues to give the Blackhawks a chance on a nightly basis. And I'll be talking more about Spencer coming up here in just a moment, Blackhawks fans. But there is the projected lineup. Forward lines, defensive pairings for tonight at Crypto.com Arena. Before moving into segment 2, do want to get into 3 quick keys to victory. My number 1 key to victory for the Blackhawks on the road tonight is to not be discouraged by Tuesday's final result. The performance, I thought, was really good. They played a really good hockey game. The bounces just didn't go their way. 2 of the 3 goals that Vegas scored in regulation were banked in off of Blackhawks defenders. Also, Carter Hart robbed them time and time again in OT. Ryan Green, Connor Bedard, Ilya Mikheyev, Ryan Donato, Frankie Nazar all had primetime chances from right out in front to put home the game winner that Carter Hart just wound up saving. But that's a road performance. I think the Blackhawks, as Blashill alluded to after the game, they did a lot of good things. If they replicate that outing, good things are going to happen for this group more times than not. So don't get discouraged by what transpired on Tuesday. Thought it was a good game for the Blackhawks defensively. If they keep that up tonight, I think they'll get back in the W column. My second key to victory for the Hawks is to win the special teams battle. As I referenced, Los Angeles plays a lot of close contested games, 8 games in a row up until their last time out against Washington that were decided by 1 goal. And often in those matchups, special teams can be the difference maker. And the Hawks have the advantage in those categories. Los Angeles is 30th on the NHL in the power play. Despite being a really good defensive team, they're not all that much better on the PK, as they're 20th in the league in that metric, while the Blackhawks are top 9 in both categories, 5th on the penalty kill, 9th on the man advantage. And the power play didn't look all that great on Tuesday in Las Vegas. They went 0 for 5 and really struggled to get things set up in the offensive zone. So if they can fare better on the man advantage, keep up what they've been doing on the penalty kill, win that special teams battle, I think they're coming out of Crypto.com Arena with 2 points tonight. And then my third and final key to victory for the Blackhawks is they can't be playing come from behind hockey against this Kings team. As we learned back on October 26th at the UC, the Kings, this is their bread and butter. This is how they go about things. Winning low-scoring, close contested matchups. That's been their forte for very, very long. And, usually backfires against them in the first round when they faced off against the Edmonton Oilers. But this is the way they go about their business. And they make it very tough for you to come back when you're trailing in the third period. Almost similarly to the Seattle Kraken, right? So I think it's really important for the Blackhawks to get off to a good start, which has not been an issue for them throughout the season, but to keep that going in the second period and take a lead going into the third and hopefully be able to hang on to this one, as they've blown third period leads in 4 of their last 7 contests. All right, that takes care of a full preview of tonight's matchup with the Los Angeles Kings, the first of 2 meetings between these teams out in Los Angeles in the next 3 days. Coming up in just a moment here, Hawks fans, I'll discuss whether Spencer Knight has a legitimate chance at making Team USA's Olympic roster. But first, I got to show some love to one of today's sponsors here on Locked On Blackhawks, which is FanDuel. The NBA season is here, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you happen to miss the start of the game or just want to ride the hot hand late, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Can also wager on Matas Buzelis, Kobe White, and other key members of the Bulls. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a much bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late fourth quarter push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So what are you waiting for? Go and head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game now with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Real quick, as always, before I get into segment 2, just a quick reminder, if you like what you're watching here today on YouTube or on a regular basis, please make sure to smash that like button for me and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. If you're tuning in through an audio platform, can also rate and review the podcast. All of it won't cost you anything, not even a single penny. Helps me out in a real big way in growing my platform. Segment 2 here on today's show, with the Olympic rosters due in just about a month's time, although there's obviously some concerns about whether this Olympic hockey tournament is even going to go down with all of the construction issues for the arena. Now there's reports that somehow the ice is smaller than the standard NHL rink, which no one is even sure how that's possible. But with the Olympics starting to be on the horizon here, I've obviously talked a lot recently about whether Connor Bedard will be playing for Team Canada, which, I mean, with what he's been doing recently and how dominant he's been for the Blackhawks, looking like one of the top 5 players, not one of the top 5 Canadians in the league, one of the top 5 players in the entire NHL. I don't know how you leave him off the roster at this point in time. But there's also another Blackhawks player who has a decent shot at being Olympic bound in Spencer Knight for Team USA. And I did, think for a moment there, one of my bold predictions that I gave out leading into the season was that Frank Nazar was going to crack the United States Olympic roster. And I did think, with the way that he raced out of the gates, that he had the best chance of any Blackhawk to make Team USA between he, Alex Vlasic, and Spencer Knight. But unfortunately, with the way that the goal scoring dipped in November, doesn't have a goal since October 28th, although he does have 7 assists over his last 9 games. I still don't think it's going to be enough to make that very competitive squad. Spencer Knight, though, Hawks fans, has definitely put himself in the conversation with how remarkably good he's been so consistently for the Blackhawks in his first year with the team. Top 5 in the NHL with a .917 save percentage among all goaltenders who have made 10 starts this year. He's also 3rd in goals saved above expected and 3rd in wins above replacement, according to Money Puck. Also 2nd in total saves as the Blackhawks. Knight's done an incredible job putting up those numbers despite the Blackhawks being one of the worst teams in the NHL in terms of shots on goal allowed per game. So not only does Knight have that lofty .918 save percentage, he's doing it with a barrage of shots coming at his direction on a nightly basis. Also 2nd in goalie point shares behind only Igor Shesterkin. 7th in point shares total among all NHL players. So that goes to show you the value that Spencer Knight has provided to this Blackhawks team this year. And while the Hawks have dropped 6 of their last 7 games, Knight's been in net for a lot of them. That's bumped his record down to 8-5-5, but still has a really strong 2.52 goals against average. However, according to the latest reports from Emily Kaplan ahead of the Blackhawks matchup against Vegas on Tuesday, Knight is still currently behind Jeremy Swayman in a battle for likely the 3rd and final goaltender spot on the United States roster. But Joe Yerdon from Bleacher Report, who admittedly is not as plugged in as Emily Kaplan is, did have Knight on his latest Team USA roster projections for Bleacher Report. So let's get into a quick breakdown in between the pipes for the red, white, and blue. I do think it's pretty straightforward in terms of who's going to be the number 1 and the number 2 for this team. Connor Hellebuyck, even though he's out right now with an injury for the Winnipeg Jets, the belief is that he still will be healthy enough to play in this tournament should, knock on wood, it actually goes down. Connor Hellebuyck is going to be the number 1 if he's healthy enough to play. And then Jake Ottinger is going to be likely his backup I don't think Hellebuck is going to be coming out of that starting role, even if Ottinger has been really good here as of late. I think it's pretty clear cut, though, that those are going to be the number one and number two guys, unless something drastic happens injury wise, which would be very unfortunate for the United States. And that leaves, a handful of players kind of competing for that third and final spot, which, obviously Spencer Knight finds himself in that mix. Jeremy Swayman, as I just alluded to. I would say I kind of agree with Swayman having a little bit of an edge over Knight right now, even if you compare the statistics between one another right here, right now. Knight has been the better goaltender, in my opinion. But Jeremy Swayman has played for the United States at the World Championship a couple of times, including last year when he was their number one to help them win their first gold medal in, I believe, almost 100 years or over 100 years. It was something crazy. But Swayman was excellent for them in that tournament with a 1.69 goals against average and 921 save percentage. And I do think that matters, right? And also, Spencer Knight was not one of the goaltenders that was invited to their Olympic orientation camp over the summer. Not that that's the end all be all, but Jeremy Swayman was, Joey Decord was of the Seattle Kraken, who's having a really good start this year. Dustin Wolf is another goaltender who could be in contention after being the Calder Trophy runner-up last year. However, his numbers have taken a dive, mostly, though, because he plays for such a crummy Calgary Flames squad. And then Thatcher Demko, I've also seen, is still in the mix, even though his numbers the last 2 years haven't been as great as they were when he had that standout 23-24 season. And he's also dealing with an injury right now. He hasn't played for the Canucks since November 11th. So I don't think Demko is in the conversation as much as people make him out to be. I really do think ultimately, Blackhawks fans, it's going to come down to Spencer Knight and Jeremy Swayman for that number 3 spot. And we still have, again, a month to go before the final rosters have to be announced. But I do agree with Emily Kaplan that Jeremy Swayman, I just think, has the edge right now. He's 11-7-0 with a 2.8 goals against average and 910 save percentage. Save percentage and GAA are both worse than Spencer Knight's. But as I mentioned, I do believe the United States is putting a lot of stock into what happened at the World Championship. And Jeremy Swayman was excellent for them. And it's not like he's been dreadful. He's been a good goalie for the Boston Bruins this year. So that's why I do feel like, even though Spencer Knight is having the better year than he is, I think Jeremy Swayman has the edge right here, right now. But as I just mentioned, still a couple of weeks to go until those final rosters are due. We'll see if Spencer Knight can make one last strong charge to prove that he deserves to be an Olympian come this February. But that's kind of the way I see things breaking down right here, right now. Make sure to let me know in the comment section, Blackhawks fans, if you see it the same way, or if you feel like Spencer Knight has done enough to vault Jeremy Swayman and be that third goaltender on Team USA's roster. That's going to take care of my thoughts on that matter. Coming up in just a moment, before I close out today's episode, want to dive into yet another Blackhawks prospect being named to a World Junior Championship roster. But first, got to show some love to another one of today's sponsors here on Locked On Blackhawks, which is Drip Drop. I think I accidentally put FanDuel twice on here. I hate when I do that. Apologies, everyone. Got to talk to you all about another one of today's sponsors, which is Drip Drop. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, my energy, my mood, and even my skin. And that's why I've been using Drip Drop. It's doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half of the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. So hydration has just become non-negotiable for me. And Drip Drop helps me feel sharper, calmer, and honestly just better overall. And right now, Drip Drop is offering our podcast listeners 20% off with your first order when you go to dripdrop.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Again, that's dripdrop.com with the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get 20% off. Go and stock up now before the heat hits hard and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Segment 3, before I close out today's episode, just a couple of days ago, I mentioned prospect AJ Spellacy being announced as part of Team USA's preliminary roster for the World Junior Championship. one of 28 players named to that team. 3 players will have to be cut from the red, white, and blue before the tournament opens up in just 3 weeks' time, just a little over 3 weeks' time in St. Paul, Minnesota. But I do feel like Spellacy has a pretty darn good chance with his diverse makeup, his size, his physicality, his speed. I do think he has a pretty good chance of cracking that final roster. Well, just yesterday, we got another announcement involving a Blackhawks prospect. His 2025 first-round selection, Vaclav Nestrasil, unsurprisingly, was named as part of Team Czechia's preliminary roster that dropped. And Czechia, by the way, has fared really well in the WJC these last 3 years. They're riding a 3-year medal streak, winning the bronze the past 2 years and then claiming the silver back in 2023. And they have a pretty sound roster once again here this year with 14 total NHL prospects led by Adam Bednarik, prospect for the Minnesota Wild, who also plays with Nick Lardis and Parker Holmes for the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL. And so does another Czech player here in this tournament in Adam Jiricek, former first-round pick of the St. Louis Blues. What a stacked roster the Brantford Bulldogs have in the OHL. Legitimate league championship aspirations for that team this year. I'll be talking, by the way, about Merrick Vanacker on tomorrow's episode, who's absolutely lightened up the Ontario Hockey League so far this year. But yeah, Adam Bednarik, Adam Jiricek, both named to Team Czechia's roster, along with Radim Murtka, high first-round pick of the Buffalo Sabres last year. Thomas Polentin, I'm admittedly not all that familiar with him, so apologies if I just butchered his name, but he was a 4th-round pick of the New York Islanders last year, who was the first overall pick in the CHL import draft this season, which some of you may remember. Martin Misiak was the first overall pick in the CHL import draft after being selected by the Blackhawks in the 2nd round of 2023. And then Adam Novotny and Vladimir Drevecki, not exactly sure. I think it could be Drevetsky, knowing that Thomas Kopetsky, who played for the Blackhawks all those years ago, part of the 2010 Stanley Cup team, his last name was also spelled EKY, and that was pronounced Kopetsky. So I do wonder if Vladimir Drevecki could be Vladimir Drevetsky. I'm not too into the weeds with the full 2026 NHL draft class yet. So make sure to take it easy on me in the comment section, Blackhawks fans. But those are the 2 2026 NHL draft prospects leading the way here on Czechia's roster. And then, of course, there's the big man, Vaclav Nestrasil, who has truly been incredible as a freshman for the UMass Minutemen so far this year. One of the most productive freshmen in all of college hockey, which has been a pleasant surprise to me because as I broke down over the summer, going into a little bit of a season preview for Vaclav Nestrasil, he was kind of a work in progress and a little bit of a project and had some things to figure out to fully round out his game in the USHL. So I thought that jumping into the Hockey East Conference as a freshman, still a little bit raw. I didn't really have all that high of expectations for Nestrasil going into this year, but oh my gosh, he has absolutely knocked it out of the park, tied for 2nd in freshman scoring in all of college hockey so far this year, and he has more points than Gavin McKenna, even though he is technically a year ahead of him in terms of draft class. But in terms of the freshman scoring, Ethan Wittenbach for Quinnipiac, 5th-round pick of the Calgary Flames in 2025, leads the way with 22 points in 16 games, 8 goals, and 14 assists. And then, as I just said, tied for 2nd is Vaclav Nestrasil and Porter Martone. Martone, of course, the 6th overall pick in the 2025 draft class by the Philadelphia Flyers. Nestrasil didn't go all the way until number 25. Incredible what his development has looked like in just a couple of months' time in college hockey, and one of the deepest conferences in college hockey as well. 19 points for Nestrasil, 9 goals and 10 assists in his first 16 collegiate games has been such a pleasant surprise, and I know he's going to be playing a monstrous role for Czechia here at the World Junior Championship in just a couple of weeks' time. So very excited to see what Vaclav Nestrasil, hopefully AJ Spellacy as well, and keeping my fingers crossed, a couple of other Blackhawks prospects, how they're going to fare at the WJC right around Christmas time. Super stoked that Vaclav Nestrasil will be playing for Czechia. They named 26 players to their preliminary roster, by the way, meaning they only have to cut one guy down for their final roster, and I know it's not going to be big Vaclav Nestrasil. All right, that is going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes as soon as they become available. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can follow me on X at JackBushman2. My Strictly Blackhawks account, though, can be found at Talkin' Hockey. Make sure to give that one a follow so you don't miss any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, go Hawks. Let's get that first win of the West Coast road trip tonight in LA. Drop down in the comment section if you're still watching all the way up until the very end. Who is going to score the opening goal of the game for the Blackhawks tonight in Los Angeles? Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.